Welcome back on this lovely Christmas Eve. Today, I want to talk about 10 games that don't just need a Switch 2 update, they are games I genuinely want to see upgraded. Don't get me wrong, these are some great titles, but at times it's hard to look past the jank, the frame drops, or the visual compromises that come with pushing aging hardware to its limits. Realistically, some of these upgrades will never happen, but that's part of the fun. It's always worth dreaming about what these games could be with a bit more breathing room. So with that said, let's jump right in. Arguably, the game that needs a Switch 2 upgrade the most is Kingdom Come: Deliverance. It's one of those ports you almost admire more than you enjoy. The fact it runs at all is impressive, but calling it a visual downgrade would be generous. The game is clearly operating right at the edge of what the system can handle. It targets 30 frames per second with extremely heavy dynamic resolution and aggressive temporal upscaling, paired with severe pop-in, frequent crashes, and poor frame rate stability. More often than not, it hovers closer to 20 frames per second than 30, and yet, despite all of that, I still had a genuinely great time with it. That's how strong the underlying game really is. Even running on the Switch 2 hardware without a dedicated patch, things do improve slightly. The frame rate hits 30 more often, and no more are those 4-minute loading screens. Unfortunately, performance still fluctuates heavily, frame pacing actually feels worse at times, and the crashes remain. The real issue though is the immersion. Kingdom Come lives and breathes on feeling grounded, reading situations, timing melee combat, and moving slowly and deliberately through the world. When performance stutters or clarity drops, that immersion completely collapses. The good news is, this game doesn't need miracles. A stable frame rate, even locked at 30, although 40 would be ideal, cleaner textures, sharper draw distance, and improved overall stability on top of the already faster load times would work wonders. At its core, this is a fantastic RPG with 50 hours in the main campaign alone, and well over 100 with all the side content and DLC. With a bit of TLC and proper stability, it could easily become one of the strongest Switch ports we've had. And I have a feeling that if we get an announcement of the sequel coming to the Switch 2, we will likely get this upgrade. So here's to hoping. The 3 XenobladE Chronicle games are genuinely top tier, and each entry improves on the last. As they stand, they are superb Switch titles, and in many ways, impressive technical achievements. That said, they aren't infallible. The longer you play, the more the technical compromises start to show. All 3 target a relatively stable 30 frames per second, but achieving that requires extremely aggressive dynamic resolution scaling. In handheld mode especially, the image can drop low enough to lose clarity in motion. And even when docked, resolution fluctuations are noticeable during exploration and combat-heavy moments. For me, this is particularly damaging, because Xenoblade is a series defined by scale. Massive environments, towering landmarks, and sweeping vistas are central to its identity. When resolution dips, those moments lose impact. Combat suffers too. Enemy outlines blur, UI elements soften, and tracking multiple threats becomes harder than it should be. At the same time, these compromises were given plenty of leeway because it felt incredible that games of this scope were running on the Switch at all. Looking back now, that goodwill has worn thin, as ridiculously entitled as that might sound. A Switch 2 upgrade could address these issues quietly but effectively, raising the minimum resolution floor, improving imagery construction, and stabilizing frame pacing would go a long way toward preserving visual clarity. A higher frame rate option would be ideal, but even a cleaner, more consistent 30 frames per second experience would significantly improve exploration and combat flow. Xenoblade already has the art direction, story, and ambition. It just needs hardware that allows those strengths to shine without being held together by compromise. I'm on the fence about whether these upgrades will actually happen, but if Monolith Soft is instead building Xenoblade Chronicles 4 for the Switch 2 from the ground up, I'd happily accept the wait. Next up is The Witcher 3, a port on the Switch that is often praised as a technical miracle, especially given its release in the first year of the Switch's lifespan, but it never quite lets you forget the compromises required to make it work. The game targets 30 frames per second, with reduced internal resolution, cut back foliage density, and shortened draw distances that are especially noticeable when riding across the world. The issue is that Witcher 3's strengths lie in its atmosphere. Long journeys through forests, villages appearing in the distance, and layered environmental detail are what make the world feel alive. When those elements are scaled back, the experience loses some of its magic. You're still getting great writing and quest design, but the world itself feels flatter and less immersive. A Switch 2 upgrade could finally let this version breathe. Higher resolution, improved foliage, draw distance, better shadows, and faster load times would dramatically improve exploration. You may disagree with me, but there is nothing worse than ridiculously long load times to ruin immersion. I think what is frustrating for us as players is seeing how fantastic the Cyberpunk port turned out from the same developer. We aren't asking for that same graphical fidelity. This is a decade-old game we are talking about now. But even without chasing next-gen visuals, simply restoring density and clarity would make this feel closer to the experience people remember, or deserve to experience for the first time. Unfortunately, I think that this update is unlikely to happen, and if we do, it is likely to be closer to the Witcher 4 release, which is almost 2 years away. And next up is Shin Megami Tensei 5, a game that has a strong visual identity, but technically, it never feels as smooth as it should. As with most, it targets 30 frames per second, yet performance and frame pacing can be very inconsistent, especially during exploration and effects-heavy battles. Even small hitches stand out in a game that relies heavily on momentum, and it hurts to say this because this is arguably my favourite JRPG made in the last decade. SMT5 is built around flow. You're constantly moving through hostile environments, scanning for threats, transitioning quickly into combat, and navigating menus at speed. When performance wobbles, that rhythm breaks, and the game starts to feel less sharp and more sluggish than intended. Even with the Vengeance update, with extra content and improved quality of life changes, the performance is left wanting. As we've come to expect, even without a patch, the Switch 2's power allows SMT5 to run at closer to 30 frames per second on a reliable basis. But there is definitely enough under the hood to exceed 30. The load times have improved slightly, but again, improvements can be made. The dynamic resolution issues from the original Switch version are also improved, but still present. But there is still a long way to go to clear and sharpen up the image, especially in handheld mode. A Switch 2 patch focused on stability would be completely transformative. A locked frame rate, improved motion clarity, faster battle transitions, and quicker loading would make the experience feel far more confident. Even modest visual upgrades paired with smoother performance would elevate SMT5 significantly, letting the design and atmosphere shine without technical distractions. I think there is a chance we could get this update, but it may be a while, as Atlus are currently working on so many different projects, in particular Persona 6. But I would happily take a pour of Metaphor ReFantasio to tide me over. Pretty please. The fifth entry is Immortal's Fenyx Rising, a colourful, energetic game built around movement. But the Switch version really struggles to maintain a consistent 30 frames per second, and at times even 20, especially in busy open-world areas and combat situations, making it extremely difficult to judge timing during gameplay, which is crucial. The graphics are a substantial downgrade, and it's one of the most blatant examples of blurry and muddy visuals we often hear talked about. It's got dynamic resolution aiming for 720p docked and 504p in handheld, and it really takes away from the overall experience. Because traversal in combat is so central, performance hiccups have a direct impact on how the game feels. Dodges, parries, and aerial movement lose responsiveness when the frame pacing falters, making the game feel heavier than its playful tone suggests. And it really is a shame, because this is one of the most underrated games on the Switch, and a little love would really help the audience grow. A Switch 2 upgrade could easily fix this. Smoother performance, higher resolution, improved distance detail, and reduced pop-in would allow the game's energy to come through properly. This is a title that doesn't need visual reinvention, just enough horsepower to keep everything moving smoothly at all times. And smooth really is the key word. It needs to be stable. This, unfortunately, is one of the least likely to get an update due to poor sales figures, which is a shame because it's arguably one I want the most. The Switch versions of My Time at Portia and My Time at Sandrock have long struggled with technical issues. Performance can be sluggish, loading times are lengthy, and UI interactions often feel delayed. In a game built around daily routines, that friction adds up quickly. The biggest issue here isn't visual fidelity, it's comfort. These games are meant to be cozy, relaxing experiences where you slip into a rhythm. When menus lag or loading interrupts simple tasks, that rhythm breaks, and the game quickly becomes frustrating instead of calming, and it really wears away at your nerves, especially the loading. It's rough. With all of that said, these are two fantastic games with immersive world building and fun engaging characters, and the core gameplay mechanics are solid and intuitive. But the lag when harvesting and entering busy areas, and especially those loading screens, are just killer. It aims for 30 frames per second, but infrequently sits there, and every time a new object is required to load, it's fluctuating, and it really is a shame. A Switch 2 upgrade focused on responsiveness would completely change how these games feel. Faster loading, smoother frame rates, improved world streaming, and a snappier UI would make the experience feel effortless. This is one of the clearest examples of how better hardware could directly improve quality of life rather than just visuals. I actually think that these two games are quite likely to receive updates, as their sequel, My Time at Evershine, has recently been announced for a Switch 2 release, and it just makes good business sense to update the predecessors prior to release and maybe offer a bundle of the two. And up next is Pokemon Legends Arceus, that introduced exciting ideas, but its technical limitations are impossible to ignore. Low detail environments, aggressive pop-in, and uneven performance constantly remind you of the hardware constraints. And it's quite telling that this is still the best Pokemon experience we've got in the last 8 or 9 years now. It's really unfortunate though, because exploration is the heart of this game. You're meant to scan the landscape, spot Pokemon from afar, and just generally feel like the world exists beyond a small bubble around your character. When the draw distance is limited, that illusion breaks, and break it does. Now, I have seen that it manages to run at a stable 30 frames per second on the Switch 2, and the frame pacing is significantly improved. But for me, this isn't enough. The draw distance needs to be significantly better, and the textures and resolution in the distance is poor. This game is 100% possible of hitting 60 frames per second and up in the graphical fidelity, and quite honestly, it deserves it. For such a long time, this really was underrated and a little bit poo-pooed. Luckily, Legends EA came out and redirected people's attention to the slop we've recently been fed, and all of a sudden, Arceus isn't looking so bad. A Switch 2 upgrade could dramatically improve this with better draw distance, improved environmental detail, and smoother performance with faster transitions. None of that would change the core design, but it would make the world feel larger, more alive, and far more immersive. And it really could elevate the game to new heights. Unfortunately, this is another one I don't feel too optimistic about. Whilst we did get patches for Scarlet and Violet, that felt more like a marketing campaign to get people to shell out for ZA. The naive, nostalgic fool in me hopes that they are radio silent because they are working on the next-gen main title. NiER Automata runs competently on Switch, but the 30 FPS cap is very noticeable in an action-heavy game like this. Combat, camera movement, and spectacle all feel less fluid than they should, and that somewhat tarnishes what in most aspects is a bloody great game. As far as I know, the developers were victim of not receiving a Switch 2 dev kit and had no idea what effect the emulation would have on their games. However, it is now over 6 months since the launch, so ample time has been had, and as far as I can tell, there are no plans for a specific patch. Yes, as expected, the hardware boost allows for a solid, stable 30 FPS in docked and handheld, and the frame time is flawless, and for all intensive purposes, you could argue it's fine, and in comparison to what it looked like originally, sure, I get it, but it deserves better. It's a good game. Nearly a great game. And it would really shine with extra graphical fidelity and at least a fixed 40 FPS. NiER relies on constant motion, dodging, jumping, and rapid perspective shifts. Higher frame rates don't just improve visuals, they fundamentally improve how the game feels to play. A Switch 2 upgrade with a 60fps option, cleaner image quality and faster load times would elevate the experience significantly. This would instantly become one of the strongest ports available, not just a serviceable compromise. But alas, I'm on the fence about this one, leaning towards no. I just think we would have heard something by now if there were any plans to upgrade. But again, here's to hoping. The penultimate game is Astral Chain, a title that is not talked about enough, and I would actually view it as an essential game to any Switch owner. It is actually one of the better performing action games on the Nintendo Switch, which is precisely why it stands out as a title that would benefit enormously from a Switch 2 upgrade. On current hardware, the game targets 30 frames per second with dynamic resolution, and while it generally holds that target better than many other titles, it still feels constrained. Combat is fast, complex, and heavily animation driven, yet everything is locked behind a performance ceiling that the game constantly brushes up against. The limitations become more noticeable the deeper you get into the game. Astral Chain's combat revolves around precise timing, quick repositioning, and simultaneous control of both the player character and their legion. When the frame rate is capped and motion clarity is reduced, inputs feel just a touch less responsive than they should. It's not broken or unstable, it just never quite reaches the level of fluidity the combat system clearly wants. This matters because Platinum Games' design philosophy thrives on smoothness. Their games feel best when animations are crisp, camera movement is clean, and player actions flow effortlessly into one another. Astral Chain already has excellent combat design, strong art direction, and a unique control scheme, but the Switch hardware prevents it from feeling as sharp as it really should. A Switch 2 upgrade here would unlock this almost immediately. A higher frame rate option, ideally 60fps, would dramatically improve responsiveness and readability in combat. Pair that with higher resolution, better image stability, and faster loading between zones, and Astral Chain would feel instantly modern. This isn't about fixing flaws, it's about letting a great action game finally run at the speed it was clearly designed for, making an essential game feel truly indispensable. And finally, a more controversial one, and a selfish pick. Alien Isolation is often cited as one of the strongest technical ports on Nintendo Switch, and for good reasons. The game runs surprisingly well given the hardware, maintaining a stable experience while preserving much of the lighting, atmosphere, and visual detail that define it. But despite how impressive the port is, it's still limited by resolution, performance caps, and loading times that hold it back from being truly definitive. The reason this matters so much is because Alien Isolation lives entirely on immersion. This is a game built on tension, silence, and subtle environment cues. Lighting, shadow quality, animation smoothness, and audio clarity are not just aesthetic elements, they're core gameplay components. Any hitch, blur, or delay can slightly dull the edge of that tension. Now, don't get me wrong, the volumetric lighting and small details such as the smoke and sparks really thrive. But it leaves me wondering, if that's possible on the OG hardware, what could be possible with the Switch 2? So this is very much a selfish pick. On Switch, the lower resolution and capped performance means the image quality can feel softer than ideal, especially in the darker scenes where clarity matters most. Load times also break the pacing more than they should, particularly after death in a game where repetition and tension are closely linked. A Switch 2 upgrade could elevate Alien Isolation dramatically without changing a single design decision. Higher resolution would sharpen environments and lighting, making shadows more defined and space more readable. Improved performance, especially an optional higher frame rate mode, would smooth camera movement and animations, enhancing both immersion and responsiveness. Faster loading would also keep the tension intact, reducing downtime between encounters. With those improvements, Alien Isolation could easily become the definitive portable survival horror experience. Arguably, it's already one of the best ports on the system. It just needs more headroom to fully realise the atmosphere it's truly built around. And there we have it. 10 games that in my opinion absolutely deserve a proper Switch 2 specific patch or upgrade. Every one of these is already a great game, But I think we're well past the point of simply accepting heavily downgraded visuals and performance just to make things fit on aging hardware. Realistically, only a handful of these will ever see meaningful updates, but that's exactly why conversations like this matter. The more people talk about these games, buy them, and keep playing them, the more likely it is that those discussions start happening behind closed doors. And you never know. You might be the player who helps push that conversation forward. I hope you enjoyed today's discussion. If you're watching on mobile, feel free to tap the hype button. I still don't really know what it does, but it definitely doesn't hurt. And let me know in the comments which games you would want to see upgraded, or if you think some of these don't need one at all. Let's be honest, that's the fun part of opinions. Not everyone's going to agree, and that's where the discussion really starts. If you did enjoy the video, consider liking and subscribing for more Switch-related chaos in the future. And with that said, thanks for watching, have a fantastic Christmas, and I'll see you around.